Welcome to JK Tells a Story, where real-life dramas unfold. Sit back and enjoy today's tale. My name is David Mitchell, and I'm a building contractor here in Denver. Sarah and I have been married for 10 years, together for 12. We met when she was working as a clerk in city planning and I was just getting my construction business off the ground. I was 26 when we first crossed paths. She was 24. It happened at this little coffee shop near downtown called The Grind. Place got torn down years ago to make room for condos. She had this shoulder-length brown hair and these incredible green eyes that just lit up when she smiled. I was smitten from day one, though it took me 3 tries before she finally agreed to go out with me. I only said yes because you promised to stop asking if I gave you one shot. She teased me years later, that playful smile dancing across her face. That first date lasted 8 hours. We grabbed dinner at this Mexican place on Colfax, caught a movie, went for coffee afterward, then just walked around Washington Park talking until past midnight. By the time I walked her to her car, I knew I wanted to marry this woman. Our courtship felt natural, comfortable. We took our time getting to know each other, really know each other. Sarah was ambitious but family-oriented, and she loved that I was building something from scratch with my business. 2 years of dating, then I proposed. We got married a year later in a small ceremony at her parents' church in Lakewood. Those first 8 years of marriage were solid. Really solid. We found this 1950s ranch house in the Highlands that needed work but had character. I renovated it room by room while Sarah decorated with her mix of vintage finds and modern touches. We talk about having kids someday, take weekend trips around Colorado, build this comfortable life together. I was faithful to Sarah from the moment we met. Unlike some of the guys I knew who seemed to always have wandering eyes, I never felt tempted. Sarah was everything I wanted. Smart, funny, supportive of my business, genuinely interested in building a life with me. Sarah climbed the ladder at work, eventually becoming head of the municipal finance department. The promotion came with a hefty salary bump and a lot more responsibility. She managed a team of 12 people, oversaw budgets for city projects. She was good at her job, respected by colleagues, and for the first time in her life, she was making real money. For 10 years, our marriage just hummed along. We had the usual disagreements about money, chores, whose turn it was to deal with this or that, but we worked through them like adults. We made love regularly, took those weekend mountain trips, seemed to be on the same page about our future. But that promotion changed things. Sarah started working longer hours, attending more professional events, dealing with contractors and developers as part of her job. She began mentioning people I didn't know, including men she worked with on various city projects. The real changes started about 18 months ago when Sarah decided she wanted to get in shape. She'd always been beautiful to me, but after turning 34, she started expressing dissatisfaction with her body. "I just don't feel like myself anymore," she'd say, standing sideways in front of our bedroom mirror. "I want to feel strong and confident again." She'd gained maybe 20 pounds over the course of our marriage, normal for anyone working a desk job, but it bothered her more and more. I started noticing her studying herself in mirrors, pulling at her clothes, making small comments about other women's figures. "You're beautiful no matter what," I told her, and I meant it. "But if this will make you feel better about yourself, I'm behind you 100%. Sarah joined Mountain Peak Fitness, this big gym in Cherry Creek that was convenient to her work. The plan was we'd work out together, make it a couples thing, maybe take some classes. But our schedules didn't line up like we'd hoped. My workdays started early and ended whenever the job was done. Sometimes 3 p.m., sometimes 8 p.m., depending on weather, inspections, client demands. Sarah's schedule was more predictable, but included evening meetings and city council sessions. So Sarah started going during lunch and after work. She threw herself into fitness with that same determination she brought to everything else. Personal trainer, spin classes, yoga, learning about nutrition and meal planning. The results were impressive. She lost 30 pounds over a year and developed muscle tone I hadn't seen since her college days. But more than the physical changes, I noticed shifts in her confidence, her whole demeanor. New clothes, updated hairstyle, wearing makeup even when we were just staying home. I feel like I'm becoming who I was meant to be, she told me one evening, getting ready for some work function. She was wearing this black dress I'd never seen before, looking absolutely stunning. You've always been who you were meant to be, I replied, meaning every word. At least you've always been perfect for me. She smiled, but it was distant, distracted, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. The gym became central to her life. She made friends there, especially with this group of women who worked downtown and exercised during lunch. They started going out for healthy dinners, attending fitness events, planning active weekend trips, hiking in Boulder, cycling tours. I was happy for her, truly. She was glowing with health and confidence, seemed more comfortable in her own skin than she'd been in years. But I also started feeling like I was becoming less important in her world. Our conversations increasingly revolved around her workouts, her fitness goals, the people she was meeting. You should come with me more often, she'd suggest occasionally. I think you'd really like some of the people there. I tried a few times. But the truth was, after 15 years in construction, I was in decent shape from physical labor. I wasn't interested in the gym culture, the loud music, intimidating equipment, feeling out of place among all these young professionals in their expensive workout gear. It's not really my scene, I tell her, and she'd nod like she understood, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. Gradually, I started noticing other changes. Sarah would come home from the gym energized and talkative, sharing stories about workouts and people she'd talked to. She mentioned men occasionally, Mike with his weight training advice, Jason training for a marathon, Derek who was some kind of executive and always made her laugh. At first, these mentions seemed innocent enough, just part of her expanding social world. But over time, I noticed certain names coming up more often with a particular tone, lighter, more animated, almost flirtatious. Brandon was telling the funniest story today about his business trip to California, she'd say. Or, Brandon thinks I should try this new protein powder. Or, Brandon invited a few of us to check out that new climbing gym downtown. Brandon. The name started appearing with increasing frequency over the past 6 months. Brandon Cole, I learned, a real estate developer who worked with the city on various projects. As head of municipal finance, Sarah interfaced with him professionally, but they'd also connected at the gym where he was apparently a regular. He's really smart about business, Sarah would say, and he's been so helpful with workout advice. Did you know he used to be a personal trainer before he got into real estate? I tried not to let it bother me. Sarah had always been friendly, always good at networking. Making connections was part of her job. But something about how she talked about Brandon started eating at me. It wasn't just the frequency. It was how her whole demeanor changed when his name came up. Her voice got lighter, more animated. She'd smile without realizing it. And she'd share details about his life that seemed personal for a professional acquaintance. Brandon's going through a rough patch with his wife, she mentioned one evening over dinner. She doesn't understand his work schedule, apparently. Gets upset when he has to travel or work late. I replied, cutting into my steak. That's tough. Yeah, he says marriage is harder than people make it out to be. That you have to work constantly to keep the spark alive. I looked up at her. Do you think we've lost our spark? She seemed surprised by the question. No, of course not. I just think, well, maybe we've gotten a little comfortable, you know? Routine. The word hung between us like smoke. Looking back, I can see I should have paid more attention to these conversations, asked more questions, suggested we spend more time together. But I was busy with work, and honestly, I thought our marriage was solid enough to weather a little distance. I was wrong. About 3 months ago, Sarah started working out more frequently. Instead of just lunch sessions, she'd go after work several times a week. Her explanations were always reasonable: new class she wanted to try, group training session, helping a friend new to fitness. I'll be a little late tonight, became a common text. Got caught up at the gym. Don't wait up for dinner. Our conversations started feeling stilted, like we were talking past each other. Sarah seemed distracted during our evening time together, often scrolling through her phone or making notes in this fitness journal she'd started keeping. 2 months ago, Sarah suggested we needed to shake things up in our relationship. She proposed we each pursue our own interests more independently, that maybe we'd been too dependent on each other. Healthy couples maintain their individual identities, she said, and I could tell she was quoting something she'd read or heard somewhere. So I started spending more time on my business, working on marketing and expansion plans I'd been putting off. Joined a woodworking class Thursday evenings. Started playing poker with some guys from work Friday nights. Sarah seemed pleased I was pursuing my own interests, and she doubled down on her fitness and social activities. But instead of bringing us closer together, the space created more distance. We were like roommates sharing expenses rather than husband and wife sharing a life. Our intimacy suffered too. We went from being together 2 or 3 times a week to maybe twice a month, and even then it felt mechanical, like we were both going through the motions. 3 weeks ago, Sarah announced she was going out for girls' night with friends from the gym. She came home after 1 a.m., slightly drunk and unusually animated. That night, she asked me, "Do you think other men find me attractive?" The question should have been a red flag the size of Texas, but I was still operating under the assumption that our marriage was fundamentally sound. Last week, she announced she was going to a bachelorette party for a gym friend named Jessica. She spent Saturday afternoon getting ready with attention to detail I hadn't seen since our wedding day. Hair done at an expensive salon, hour on makeup, wearing this black dress considerably more revealing than her usual wardrobe. "You look incredible," I told her, and I meant it. "Almost too good for a girl's night." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Can't a woman dress up for her friends?" Something made me drive past the club where she said they were going. Her car was there, but when I went inside and found her, my heart sank. She was dancing closely with a man I'd never seen. Tall, well-built, with that confident demeanor that screamed successful professional. They were dancing intimately, more intimately than seemed appropriate, and he had his hands on her in ways that made my stomach clench. Watching her allow it, seeing her press against him, I knew our marriage was in serious trouble. I left feeling sick and betrayed, but also confused. What I'd seen was inappropriate, but it wasn't technically cheating. Still, she'd certainly approached that line. When she came home that night, she seemed hungover and distant. Sunday she spent doing laundry and meal prep, activities that kept her busy without requiring much conversation. Monday and Tuesday were normal, or what passed for normal lately. We exchanged pleasantries, discussed work schedules, went through the motions of married life. But Wednesday evening, that's when everything changed. I walked through the door after work Wednesday evening, and Sarah was waiting for me in the kitchen. Not cooking, not cleaning, just waiting. "David, we need to talk," she said, gesturing to the kitchen table. "It's important." My stomach dropped. Those words never led anywhere good. I set down my keys and took a seat across from her, watching as she fidgeted with her wedding ring. "I want you to know that I love you," she began, not meeting my eyes. "I would never want to hurt our marriage intentionally." The way she said intentionally made my blood run cold. "Okay, David, I love you and I want us to grow old together, but..." She took a deep breath, and I knew whatever came next was going to turn my world upside down. "I've made a decision. I want to have an affair." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat there for a moment, sure I'd misheard her. "I'm sorry, what?" "I've met someone I'd like to have a physical relationship with. It would only be occasionally, and I promise to always be honest with you about it. I love you enough that I believe this won't affect my feelings for you. If you truly love me, you should let me do this because I feel like I need to." She actually smiled as she said it, like she was asking permission to work late or go shopping with friends. "Sarah, I don't, I can't understand why you think you need to do this. And I sure as hell can't understand how it wouldn't affect us. My voice was steady, but inside I was reeling. Have you already made plans with this person? She nodded. We're planning to go away next weekend. I stared at her, this woman I'd loved for 12 years, and felt like I was looking at a stranger. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest. How would you react if I had come to you with this same proposal? She was quiet for a moment, then said firmly, You know damn well you would have lost your mind if I'd brought this up. I almost laughed at the irony. Well, whatever you've been thinking, it's clearly not working out the way you planned. Did you really think I'd just give you permission to sleep with this guy? That I'd sit at home twiddling my thumbs while you go off for the weekend? Maybe I didn't think this through properly, she admitted. You're right. I did consider my own feelings more than yours. If I say no, will you do it anyway? I honestly don't know. I never expected you to refuse me. The casual way she said it, like my refusal was unreasonable, made my anger flare, but I kept my voice level. Here's what we're going to do. Give me a few days to think about this. Let's sit down Sunday afternoon and talk after I've had time to process. That night, I moved my things to the guest room. When she asked what I was doing, I explained that I didn't want to share a bed with someone who was more interested in being with someone else. The door closed behind me with a finality that felt like the end of everything I'd thought was solid in my life. I lay awake most of that night, staring at the ceiling of what had become my bedroom. 10 years. 10 years of building a life together, of shared dreams and quiet Sunday mornings and inside jokes that nobody else understood. I thought about our first apartment, how we'd eaten off paper plates for 3 months because we couldn't afford real dishes. How Sarah would fall asleep reading next to me, her book sliding off her chest, and I'd carefully mark her page and turn off the light. Now she wanted to share a bed with someone else. The next morning, I left for work as usual but called my office to say I needed the next 2 days for personal reasons. Then I set to work protecting myself. My electrician friend Danny Rodriguez owed me a favor from when I'd helped him get bonded for a big commercial job. Danny was also something of a tech enthusiast who'd installed security systems for several of my clients. I need your help with something, I told him over coffee at a diner near his shop. And I need you to keep it between us. I explained the situation without too much detail. Danny listened without judgment. He'd been through his own divorce 5 years earlier. Man, that's rough, he said, shaking his head. What do you need? I want to protect myself legally. If she's planning to have an affair, I need evidence for divorce proceedings. Danny was quiet for a moment. Look, David, I get it, but you need to be careful about legal issues. Recording someone without knowledge can get you in trouble. What would you do? I'd hire a professional, someone who knows the law and can get admissible evidence. That's how I found myself in the office of Marcus Webb, a private investigator Danny recommended. Webb was a former Denver police detective with 20 years' experience, a stocky man in his 50s with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Matrimonial cases are 60% of my business, Webb told me after I explained the situation. Your wife hasn't committed adultery yet, but if she's planning it, we can document the emotional affair, the planning, the intent. Phone records, surveillance, financial transactions, all legal and admissible. His fee was steep, $150 per hour plus expenses, but I figured it was cheaper than losing half my business to a cheating wife. What exactly can you do? I asked. Phone record analysis, surveillance when they're in public spaces, documentation of their meetings and communications. If they go to a hotel, I can document their arrival and departure, their behavior in public areas. I can't record private conversations or enter private spaces without permission, but I can build a compelling case about the nature of their relationship. We spent another hour discussing strategy and timelines. Webb would start immediately, beginning with surveillance and communication analysis. My next stop was the bank. I opened a separate checking account and transferred half our joint savings. I wasn't trying to steal from Sarah, just protect myself. I also applied for a credit card in my name only, planning to cancel our joint cards after filing for divorce. The Verizon store was next. Since both phones were on a family plan under my name, I could request detailed billing records. The customer service rep was helpful, and I walked out with 30 pages of call logs and text timestamps. Sitting in my truck in the parking lot, I reviewed the records. It was worse than I'd thought. Dozens of calls and texts between Sarah's number and an unknown number, starting about 6 weeks ago and increasing in frequency. In the past week alone, they'd exchanged over 50 messages. I called the unknown number and got voicemail. "You've reached Brandon Cole with Cole Development." So it was true. Sarah and Brandon had been in constant communication for weeks. The evidence was right there in black and white. Calls lasting 30, 40 minutes, sometimes late at night after I'd gone to bed. That afternoon, I met with Rebecca Martinez at Martinez Associates, a family law firm Danny had recommended. Rebecca was sharp, mid-40s, with graying hair and intelligent eyes that suggested she'd seen every kind of marital disaster. "Tell me what's happening, Mr. Mitchell," she said, settling behind her desk with a legal pad. I explained everything, showing her the phone records and Webb's preliminary assessment. Rebecca listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. "This is fairly straightforward," she said when I finished. "Your wife is planning adultery, and we can protect your assets now before she goes through with it. Colorado is no fault, but adultery still matters for property division, especially if marital assets were used to facilitate the affair." She explained the process. We'd file for legal separation immediately after I had documented evidence of the affair. This would protect my assets and establish grounds for fault-based divorce. We'd also prepare a cease and desist letter for Brandon, warning him about potential alienation of affection claims. "The goal isn't necessarily to go to trial," she explained. "It's to protect you financially and encourage a reasonable settlement. Most people, when faced with clear evidence and potential public exposure, prefer to settle quietly." What about Brandon? Alienation of affection is still actionable in Colorado, though it's rarely used. If we can prove he knowingly interfered with your marriage, we can sue him for damages. It's more about leverage than actually going to trial. I left her office feeling like I'd taken the first concrete step toward protecting myself. For the first time since Sarah's announcement, I felt some control over the situation. Friday evening, Sarah seemed agitated when I got home. She was pacing the kitchen, checking her phone constantly, and had apparently changed clothes several times. I could see different outfits draped over the bedroom chair. "How was your day?" she asked, but wasn't really listening for an answer. "Fine. You seem nervous about something." "Just work stuff," she said quickly. "Busy weekend coming up." We had dinner, leftover Chinese food, and made awkward conversation about weekend plans. Sarah mentioned she was probably going to spend Saturday with a friend, but didn't provide details. Around 9 p.m., she announced she was going to bed early. "Big day tomorrow," she said. I stayed in the living room watching TV, waiting to see if she'd make any calls. Sure enough, around 10 p.m., I heard her talking quietly in the bedroom. The conversation lasted about 20 minutes, and I could hear the excitement in her voice even though I couldn't make out words. The sound of my wife's animated conversation with another man, in our bedroom, in our bed, made something cold settle in my chest. This was really happening. I avoided Sarah all weekend until Sunday afternoon when it was time for our promised conversation. We both sat at the kitchen table where we'd had so many meals together, so many discussions about our future. "I've thought about this from every angle," I began, "and despite your claims that it wouldn't affect our marriage, it's already causing problems. Look at how upset you've been, how distant we've become. If you tried to see this from my perspective, you might understand why I can't accept this." She was fidgeting with a napkin, tearing it into small pieces. I thought you loved me enough to understand. I do love you. That's exactly why I can't share you with someone else. So I have to say no. How can you be so selfish when you claim to love me? She asked, her voice rising. If anyone's being selfish here, it's you, wanting to be with someone else while expecting me to just accept it. What if I do it anyway? The question hung in the air between us. This was the moment of truth. Then there will be serious consequences. 10 years ago, we both made vows to be faithful to each other. I understand, but this is something I need. I stood up, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Well, I guess this conversation is over. I drove to a coffee shop with Wi-Fi and checked the monitoring system Webb had set up. Within an hour, Sarah had sent frantic emails to Brandon, assuring him she was going regardless of my objection. His response was immediate and telling, "Great! I've already reserved room 125 at the Hilton in Boulder for Friday and Saturday nights." I immediately called Webb and had him reserve an adjacent room for surveillance. They were making this too easy. Their email exchange revealed they'd moved past my refusal entirely and were deep into planning their weekend. Check-in was at 3 p.m., so Brandon planned to pick her up at 1 o'clock. They wanted to arrive as soon as possible for the 2-hour drive. Reading their messages felt surreal. My wife of 10 years was planning her betrayal with the casual efficiency of organizing a business trip. Brandon was clearly experienced at this. He knew which hotels were discreet, which restaurants were romantic, how to plan an affair. I'd been avoiding Sarah for days, but Wednesday felt like the moment for one last attempt. I needed to give her a final chance to reconsider, for my own conscience if nothing else. "Sarah, can you sit with me for a minute?" I asked when she got home from work. She looked surprised but sat down across from me at the kitchen table. Her wedding ring caught the light as she placed her hands on the surface between us. "Have you given this more thought? Any second thoughts about your plans?" She shook her head firmly. "I've made my decision, David. I'm going through with it. Brandon and I are going away this weekend, and I hope afterward we can move past this. This is your last chance to reconsider," I said quietly. "Don't throw away our marriage for someone else. Don't make me take the steps I'll have to take if you do this." Something in my tone must have gotten through to her because she paused, studying my face. "What steps?" "The kind that protect me when the person I loved most in the world decides I'm not enough anymore." Despite my warning, she remained firm. "I've made my choice." I stood up slowly, feeling something die inside my chest. "Then you've chosen Brandon over me. I hope you understand what that means." I left the room, closing the door firmly behind me, a gesture that felt final, like sealing a tomb. Our marriage was over, and tomorrow I would begin documenting its death. Thursday morning, I went to work and asked for the afternoon off. My foreman, Jake, had known me for 8 years and could tell something was wrong. "Everything okay, boss?" "Personal stuff," I said. "Family issues." He nodded and didn't push. "Take what time you need. We've got this covered." I drove to Boulder that afternoon to meet Webb and finalize preparations. The Hilton was a nice property overlooking the Flatirons, the kind of place Sarah and I might have gone for our anniversary if we were still celebrating those. Webb was already there, having checked into room 127, adjacent to Brandon and Sarah's reserved room 125. He showed me the surveillance equipment, small, professional-grade cameras and recording devices. "Everything's legal," he assured me. "We'll document their arrival, their behavior in public areas, their departure. I can't record inside their room, but body language, timing, and their interaction in the lobby and restaurant will tell the story." We tested communication equipment and went over the plan. Webb would handle all documentation while I stayed away from the hotel entirely. "The key is to be thorough but legal," he explained. "We want evidence that will hold up in court and can't be challenged on procedural grounds." When I returned home that evening, Sarah was upstairs getting ready. I could hear her moving around, opening drawers, the sound of a zipper. She was packing for her betrayal. I went to my study and sat at my desk, looking at photos from our wedding day. Sarah in her white dress, looking radiant and promising to forsake all others. My younger self, so confident in our future together. 10 years. It felt like a lifetime and an instant simultaneously. Friday morning, I got up and left at my usual time without saying anything to Sarah. I went to Rebecca's office and signed the divorce papers, which would be served Monday afternoon. I also signed papers authorizing a cease and desist letter to Brandon and notice of potential alienation of affection claims. Once we serve these papers, Rebecca explained, there's no going back. Are you certain this is what you want? I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Around noon, I drove home knowing Sarah would be at the hair salon. Webb was tracking her movements as part of the surveillance. I went upstairs to our bedroom, where her suitcase was packed and waiting by the door. Seeing her preparations hit me harder than I'd expected. New clothes with tags still attached, expensive lingerie I'd never seen, toiletries arranged like she was going on a honeymoon. The woman I'd loved for 12 years had packed a bag to betray everything we'd built together. I sat on our bed, my bed now, and tried to process the finality of it. In a few hours, my wife would leave with another man, and our marriage would be over in every way that mattered. I went to her jewelry box and carefully removed her wedding rings, the engagement ring that had been my grandmother's, and the wedding band I'd placed on her finger in that little church in Lakewood 10 years ago. They felt heavier than I remembered. When Sarah came home around 12:30, she was upstairs getting ready. I could hear her singing softly to herself, actually singing, as she prepared to leave me for another man. That I walked into our bedroom without knocking. She startled and reached for a robe, but I held up my hand. Don't bother being modest, I said. I've seen it all before. She looked absolutely stunning. New hairstyle that framed her face perfectly, flawless makeup, an outfit that was clearly chosen for someone else's appreciation. She'd never looked more beautiful, and it broke my heart. You look incredible, I said, and meant it. I'm disappointed you haven't made this kind of effort for me in quite a while. I just wanted to feel good about myself today, she replied, not meeting my eyes. You look incredible, I continued, but I get the feeling you care more about what he thinks than you've cared about what I think in a long time. She started to apologize, but I approached her and gently took the rings from her left hand. She didn't resist. This ring I gave you on our wedding day meant something to me, I said, looking at the simple gold band. It symbolized our promise to forsake all others. It seems to mean less to you. I explained that I didn't want to see my ring on her finger while she was with another man. The engagement ring had been my grandmother's, and I wanted to keep it for sentimental reasons. Both rings went into my pocket. I won't be here when he arrives, but I don't want him in my house. You can't bring him here. If you do, there will be consequences for both of you. Do you understand? Yes, I won't let him in. Good. I'll be watching, I said. Why are you acting like this? She asked, and for a moment she sounded like the Sarah I'd fallen in love with. Confused, vulnerable, almost childlike. Because the love of my life has broken that love, I said simply. I hope this weekend is worth the consequences. Goodbye, Sarah. I turned and walked away from my wife for what I knew would be the last time as her husband. She called after me as I left, but I was done that I parked down the street where Sarah could see me if she looked. I wanted her to know I was watching, that her actions had consequences. Soon his car arrived, a black BMW that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. Brandon Cole stepped out, and I got my first good look at my wife's lover. Tall, well-built, expensive suit, the kind of confident swagger that comes with success and money. I could see why Sarah was attracted to him. He walked to the door and rang the bell. Sarah came out with her suitcase, set it down, and embraced him. Then came a passionate kiss that made my stomach clench. This wasn't just an affair. There was real chemistry between them. As he picked up her suitcase, She looked directly at me with a defiant expression. She wanted me to see this, wanted me to know she was choosing him. She got in beside him and gave me another challenging look as they drove past. I gave them a gesture that made my feelings about her behavior perfectly clear. When they were gone, I returned home and changed all the locks and the garage door code. I'd already packed my bag, so I grabbed it and drove to Boulder, where I'd reserved a room at a different hotel. Webb called around 4 p.m. They've checked in. Everything's in place. I spent the evening in my hotel room, trying to read, trying to watch TV, trying to do anything but think about what my wife was doing. But my mind kept drifting to her, to them together, to the casual way she'd thrown away our decade together. Saturday morning, I decided to apply some psychological pressure. At 11 a.m., I called a local florist and ordered a bouquet similar to the ones I used to give Sarah on our anniversary, white roses and baby's breath, her favorites. "What would you like the card to say?" the florist asked. "Just remember what you're giving up." I had them deliver it to room 125 at 11:30 a.m. Webb called me 10 minutes later. "Package delivered." She looked shocked, then angry. "They're arguing about something." My phone rang shortly after. "Hello, and how are you doing?" I answered, keeping my voice casual. "Not great." Sarah's voice was tight with anger. "I just received flowers exactly like the ones you always give me on our anniversary. What are you trying to prove?" "I'm not sure what you mean. You and your brilliant boyfriend kept me in the dark about your plans. Remember? Besides, if I had sent flowers, they would have been something less pleasant, and the card would have been addressed to my cheating wife. That's not very nice. Neither is your weekend with Brandon. Maybe the flowers will remind you what you're throwing away." I hung up before she could respond. She tried calling back several times, but I didn't answer. An hour later, I arranged for her favorite pizza to be delivered to their room. Then her favorite sandwich from a deli downtown. Each interruption, according to Webb's reports, seemed to frustrate Brandon more and create doubt in Sarah's mind. "She's getting paranoid," Webb reported. "Keeps checking the windows, jumping at every knock on the door." He's trying to reassure her, but she's clearly rattled. The psychological pressure was working. Sarah was beginning to understand that actions have consequences, that I wasn't going to simply accept her betrayal and wait for her to come home. That evening, Webb reported they'd gone to dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Boulder. "They look tense," he said. "Not like a romantic couple. More like people trying to convince themselves they're having fun." I went to bed that night knowing that tomorrow would bring the final confrontation and the end of my marriage. Sunday afternoon, I returned home ahead of Sarah. I was sitting on the couch watching football when she walked in, looking tired and uncertain. The confident woman who'd left Friday afternoon was gone, replaced by someone who seemed smaller, deflated. "I'm home," she announced, as if this were any normal weekend return. I barely acknowledged her presence, keeping my eyes on the TV. She walked directly in front of the screen, giving me what she probably thought was a sultry smile. "I thought you'd be glad to see me, considering I'm not dead." "What gave you that impression?" I asked, turning my attention back to the TV. "Did you think I'd suddenly become stupid?" "I don't think you're stupid, but I thought your love for me was strong enough to get through this." I looked at her directly for the first time, really looked at her. She was still beautiful, but something had changed. The confidence was gone, replaced by uncertainty and what looked like regret. "I did love you completely," I said quietly, past tense. "That changed when you left with him despite everything I said to you. I poured my heart out, begged you not to destroy our marriage, and it meant nothing. Once you left with him, I stopped caring whether you'd come back." She looked stunned, like she'd expected anger but not this cold indifference. "I can't believe you feel that way about me." "Well, I do. You made a serious mistake, Sarah. Is there any chance we can work through this? I'll do anything to make this right." I let out a bitter laugh. "Anything? Get on your knees and beg forgiveness. I can't do that. That's what I thought. Your promises to save our marriage are about as valuable as your promise to be faithful when we got married. She tried a different approach, moving closer, her voice softer. I was thinking about you all weekend. I want to make love tonight. You need me? I don't think so. Making love tonight? Not happening. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our neighborhood, our old life. Did you use protection with Brandon? No, but he's married and clean. Do you think you're the only woman he's been with? Are you safe? As far as I'm concerned, I won't touch you until you get a clean bill of health from a doctor. Besides, I don't accept being second choice. If you're worried, just use protection. She snapped, her frustration finally showing. Right, I'm going to use protection with my own wife after she spent the weekend with another man. Forget it. You chose Brandon over me. I grabbed my keys from the counter. I'm going out. I can't stand looking at you tonight. You can sleep in the guest room. I prefer the master bedroom. Unlike you, I didn't do anything wrong. We can talk about this when you get back from work tomorrow. I'm not sure what else there is to discuss. I left the house and went to a nearby restaurant for dinner, needing distance from her and time to think. When I returned around 10 p.m., she was in our bed. My bed now. I gave her a stern look. Get out. This isn't our bed anymore. You gave up that right when you chose Brandon. This is my bed too. I have the same right. No, you don't. So get out, or I'll throw you and your belongings onto the street. She started crying, real tears this time, not the manipulative kind. She slowly left the room, and I locked the door behind her. I could hear her sobbing in the hallway, but those tears had come too late to matter. I lay in bed that night thinking about the irony. For 10 years, I'd shared this bed with someone I thought I knew completely. Now I was alone in it, and somehow it felt more honest than anything we'd shared in months. Monday morning, I ignored her completely. We both had breakfast in silence. Me reading the paper, her checking her phone constantly. As she prepared to leave for work, she turned at the door. I love you, she said, her voice small and uncertain. I gave her a cold, contemptuous look. I loved you too. Past tense. I saw the hurt well up in her eyes as she turned and walked away. It was the last time I would see her as my wife. Once she was gone, I began the final phase. I'd already packed her belongings over the weekend, so I carried the bags to the front yard. Then I called Brandon's wife, Jennifer. Mrs. Cole, this is David Mitchell. Are you aware that your husband spent the weekend with my wife? There was a long pause. He said he was away on business in Grand Junction. I have evidence that says otherwise. Photographs, documentation, hotel records. Would you like to see it? Another pause. Yes, I would. When I arrived at Jennifer's house with Webb's evidence file, I was surprised by her appearance. She was absolutely stunning. Tall, elegant, with prematurely silver hair and intelligent blue eyes. I stammered an apology for my initial shock. I'm sorry, you're not what I expected. She gave me a wry smile that didn't reach her eyes. My husband apparently prefers variety to quality. We sat in her immaculate living room, everything perfectly arranged, like a magazine spread. I spread out the photos and documentation Webb had gathered. Jennifer studied them methodically, her face growing colder with each image. 20 years, she said quietly. 20 years of marriage, and this is what I get. She was furious but controlled, the kind of anger that runs cold and deep. We agreed to visit my attorney together to see if Rebecca would take her case as well. Rebecca Martinez agreed to represent Jennifer and offered us a package deal. Coordinated divorces can be more effective, she explained. When both spouses file simultaneously, it prevents either party from hiding assets or getting a head start on protection. While Jennifer completed her paperwork, I spoke with Rebecca about timing. Do I need to wait to serve Brandon to protect her case? I asked. As long as she signs first, she'll be fine. We can coordinate the service for maximum impact. Serve them both at the same time at their respective workplaces. We went to lunch while the papers were prepared. Jennifer turned out to be intelligent and direct, qualities I found refreshing after months of Sarah's manipulation and mixed signals. I knew he was selfish, she said over coffee, but I never thought he was stupid enough to throw away everything we built, our house, our reputation, our friends. All for what? A fling with a married woman? Maybe that's what made it exciting for him, I said. The risk, the secrecy. Well, the secrecy's over now. After Jennifer signed her papers, I drove home to wait for the inevitable phone call. I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang around 3 p.m. Sarah's voice was shaking with rage and panic. What the hell is this? I was just served with divorce papers at work, in front of everyone. And Brandon got some papers about being sued. Everything seems pretty straightforward to me, I replied calmly. I warned you there would be consequences. You didn't seem to take me seriously. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. Maybe you should have listened to me instead of believing everything Brandon told you. Let's not discuss this over the phone. We can talk when you get home. Then I hung up. I had already placed Sarah's belongings in bags in the front yard. I'd also set up Webb's camera to record the confrontation. It could be useful for a restraining order if things got ugly. When Sarah pulled into the driveway and saw her possessions scattered about, she exploded. She was screaming incoherently, spittle flying as she vented her rage at discovering her carefully planned affair had consequences. I remained calm as she ranted, eventually breaking in to start our final conversation. If you want to talk, you need to sit down so we can have a civil conversation. If not, I'll help you load your things and you can leave. I never thought you'd do this to me, she sobbed, her anger giving way to desperation. Do this to you? I replied firmly. You foolish woman, you did this to us. I warned you multiple times not to destroy our marriage, but you chose to do exactly that. Why wouldn't I file for divorce? You said you loved me, she whimpered. I did love you more than anything, but you broke my heart in return. The problem is you never loved or respected me enough. I can't live with someone who thinks so little of me that she'd ask permission to cheat. Her face crumpled. I thought if I was honest about what I needed, we could work it out somehow. Honest. I laughed bitterly. You were planning this for months. The emails, the phone calls, the lies about working late. That wasn't honesty. That was manipulation. Why are you being so harsh about Brandon? I had to suppress a laugh. Sarah, I had investigators document everything that happened this weekend. I'm not impressed with your choice. From what I observed, you gave up 10 years of marriage for someone who couldn't even make the weekend worthwhile. She looked confused. What do you mean? Let's just say your weekend getaway looked more stressful than romantic. Constant interruptions, arguments, tension. Is that really what you thought you were missing? We made love, she said defensively. It was meaningful. Look at it this way, I said, feeling suddenly tired. Now you have the freedom to be with whoever you want. You can have a different man every night if that's what makes you happy. She shook her head vigorously. I don't want that. I want you, only you. Let's go inside and sit down for a few minutes, I said, my anger giving way to exhaustion. I'm sorry for the harsh words. I'm dealing with a lot of anger right now, but I would never physically hurt you. We went inside and sat at the kitchen table one last time. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was where she'd first told me about her affair, and now it was where our marriage would officially end. You wouldn't really hurt Brandon, would you? She asked, studying my face. Why not? He helped destroy our marriage knowingly and deliberately. He should pay more than just lawsuits and legal fees. I paused. He won't be getting divorced, by the way. His wife decided to give him a chance to work things out. Sarah looked confused and hurt. Really? Or is that just to make me look bad? I met with his wife this morning and shared all the evidence with her. He told her he was away on business in Grand Junction. She hired the same law firm we're using. We got a group discount. The realization hit her then. She'd been played. Brandon had lied to his wife just like he'd probably lied to her about his intentions. "I wish you'd been honest with me about your plans," she said quietly. "How would you have reacted if I told you I wanted to sleep with another woman? You'd have lost your mind." Brandon knew his wife would never agree to an open marriage. "I doubt you believe me even now, and that's one reason we're getting divorced." "So you're really throwing me out?" "Yes, I am. The night you told me about your plan, I knew within an hour that I wanted a divorce. Thursday, I hired the investigator and started the legal process. Friday, I signed the papers. Why didn't you tell me you were planning to divorce me? I might have reconsidered." I looked at this woman I'd loved for 12 years, seeing a stranger. "Sarah, I loved you so much that forgiveness might have been possible once. But you threw away your final chance Sunday night when you came home and acted like nothing had changed. I might be able to forgive you, but I'll never trust you again. I'd spend every day wondering when you'd want someone else next." She couldn't hold back her tears anymore. "I'm like you," I continued. "I've thought this through completely, and I keep reaching the same conclusion. I'm going to divorce you, and Brandon's going to pay for his part in destroying my marriage. You can call him if you want to share an apartment, but I doubt he'll be available. His wife is probably having her own conversation with him right now. I left half our checking account balance for you and removed my name from the joint account. I'll split our savings 50-50. You can keep your car, but you'll handle the payments. Take all your clothes and personal items. Once you find a place, you can have whatever furniture you want. But the house is mine. If I sell it, I'll split the proceeds with you fairly. It's all laid out in the divorce papers. If you contest it, I'll use all the evidence I have. Photos, emails, phone records, witness statements, and it won't end well for you. The smart thing is to sign the papers and move on." "I won't fight it," she said quietly. "This is all my fault. I just wish I could undo it." "Well," I said, trying to lighten the mood despite everything, "do you know the difference between a cheating wife and a light bulb?" She looked confused through her tears. "No, what?" "You can unscrew a light bulb." She didn't find it amusing, but I hadn't expected her to. "It's time for you to go," I said, standing up. I helped her load everything into her car while she watched tearfully. Each bag felt like I was packing away a piece of our shared history. Once everything was loaded, I opened her car door and handed her one final item, her wedding ring, which I'd had flattened by a jeweler that afternoon. "It's just scrap gold now," I told her. "You can sell it if you need the money." After closing her car door, I leaned in and kissed her forehead one last time, a gesture that felt both intimate and final. "Goodbye, Sarah." Then I turned and walked back to my empty house. I didn't watch her drive away. I couldn't, because despite everything, my eyes were filled with tears. I cried for another hour until I was emotionally drained, grieving not just for my marriage but for the woman I'd thought she was. As I sat in my empty house that evening, I realized I had three choices for moving forward. First, I could drown my sorrows in alcohol and drink myself into oblivion. But I barely drank and hated hangovers, so that wasn't appealing. Second, I could end my life and supposedly make everyone happy. But I refused to give Sarah and Brandon that satisfaction. Third, I could stand up, knowing I'd done nothing wrong, and move forward with my life. The silver lining was Sarah's absence. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely in my own home. I straightened up and, feeling oddly liberated, called Jennifer. We made plans for dinner that evening. Not as a date, but as two people helping each other through similar trauma. "How are you holding up?" she asked when we met at a quiet restaurant downtown. "Better than I expected," I said honestly. Angry, hurt, but also relieved, like I can finally stop pretending everything was okay. I know exactly what you mean. 20 years of marriage, and I kept making excuses for his behavior. He's just ambitious. Or he's under a lot of stress. Turns out he was just selfish and dishonest. We talked for hours about our marriages, our divorces, our plans for the future. Jennifer was intelligent, direct, and refreshingly honest about her feelings. There was no manipulation, no hidden agenda, just two adults having an honest conversation about betrayal and recovery. I'm not ready for anything romantic, she said as we walked to our cars. I need time to figure out who I am outside of being Brandon's wife. I understand completely, but I'd like to stay friends, if you're okay with that. I'd like that too. Driving home, I realized I was already starting to heal. The betrayal still hurt, probably always would, but I was beginning to see possibilities beyond the pain. The divorce proceedings moved quickly over the following months. Sarah didn't contest the adultery charge or fight the property division. The evidence Webb had gathered was overwhelming, and she seemed genuinely remorseful about what she'd done. I never meant for it to go this far, she told me during one of our few post-divorce conversations. I thought I could have both, the excitement with Brandon and the security with you. I know how stupid that sounds now. You thought you could have your cake and eat it too, I replied. Marriage doesn't work that way. Brandon's situation was more complicated. Jennifer initially wanted to work things out, but when she discovered through our shared attorney that Brandon had been having affairs for years, not just with Sarah, she proceeded with her own divorce. Your wife wasn't his first, Rebecca informed me during one of our meetings. Apparently, he's been systematically cheating throughout his marriage. Sarah was just the latest in a long line. The alienation of affection lawsuit against Brandon was settled out of court for $45,000. His attorney argued that my marriage was already in trouble, but the evidence of their months-long emotional affair and deliberate planning was too strong to ignore. He wants this to go away quietly, Rebecca explained. His business depends on his reputation, and a public trial would destroy him professionally. Sarah moved into a small apartment across town and started therapy. According to mutual acquaintances, she was struggling with guilt and regret, finally understanding what she'd thrown away for a weekend with a man who'd played her as expertly as he'd played his wife. Brandon's real estate business suffered significantly when word got out about the lawsuits and his pattern of affairs. Denver's business community is smaller than people think, especially in construction and development, and his reputation took a permanent hit. Several major clients canceled contracts, and his firm lost its city development deals. I threw myself into work, expanding Mitchell Construction and taking on larger projects. The settlement money from Brandon helped me purchase new equipment and hire additional employees. By year's end, my business had grown from 8 employees to 15, and we were handling some of the most prestigious residential projects in the Denver area. Success, I discovered, was the best revenge, not against Sarah or Brandon specifically, but against the part of myself that had been willing to accept less than I deserved. About 6 months after the divorce was final, I was working on a kitchen renovation in Cherry Hills Village when I met Lisa Chun. She was a marketing manager for a tech company who'd bought a 1980s condo in Capitol Hill and was slowly updating it herself. I watch a lot of YouTube videos and hope for the best, she said with a laugh when I offered professional advice about her renovation plans. Lisa was refreshingly different from Sarah. She was direct about what she wanted, honest about her feelings, and completely independent. She'd been divorced for 3 years from a marriage that ended amicably when she and her ex-husband realized they wanted different things from life. We're actually still friends, she told me over coffee. He wanted the suburban house, kids, PTA meetings. I wanted to travel, focus on my career, maybe get a graduate degree. We tried to make it work for 5 years, but eventually we had to admit we were just incompatible. No one cheated, no one lied, we just grew apart. When Lisa asked about my divorce, I gave her the complete story: Sarah's affair, the investigation, the evidence gathering, my calculated response. I expected her to be put off by the methodical nature of my actions, but her response surprised me. Your wife asked permission to cheat and then acted surprised when you protected yourself, she said. That's not just betrayal, it's manipulation. You were hurt and betrayed, so you took care of yourself. I respect that. Lisa and I started dating casually, which evolved into a serious relationship over the next year. She was everything Sarah hadn't been. Honest about her feelings, direct in communication, and completely trustworthy. We moved in together after 18 months and married 2 years later. Our wedding was small and focused on the promises we were making rather than the ceremony itself. We wrote our own vows, emphasizing honesty, direct communication, and the commitment to choose each other daily. I promise to tell you when I'm angry instead of expecting you to guess, Lisa said during the ceremony. I promise to ask for what I need instead of hoping you'll figure it out. And I promise to love you for who you are, not for who I think you could become. My vows were similar. I promise to trust you until you give me a reason not to. I promise to listen even when I don't want to hear what you're saying. And I promise to choose you every day, not just when it's easy. Standing there, listening to Lisa's promises, I realized that sometimes the worst betrayal can lead to the greatest blessing. I had lost a marriage built on lies and found one built on truth. And for the first time in years, I felt truly whole. Thank you for your viewing. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.